If you didn't write something down in the last minute or so, I invite you to keep thinking about it and to seriously write something down. It's a really important question. What do you need? Think about that if you haven't already thought about it. Our reading from the Hebrew Bible or Old Testament this morning starts in a really interesting place. And you'd have to know a little bit more about the story of Job, I think, to really understand what's happening within this text. First, Job is one of the best men in the Bible. Now, that's my interpretation, but what Yahweh says about Job is pretty similar. There is no one like him on all the earth, a man who is honest, of absolute integrity, who reveres God and avoids evil. Job is so great that even the accuser or the prosecutor, a better name, I think, to understand the role of Satan in the Old Testament, even he has taken notice of Job. Yes, the accuser has scoured the entire earth and has come to the council of divine beings with a test. Does Job love God because of his good fortune and station in life? Or does Job love God because God is God? That's a really important question. Huge, huge implications. They go in a lot of directions. I got to be honest, I think that within the penumbras or the shadows of this text, there's a real critique of what we might today call the prosperity gospel. Given this question, given this test that the accuser sets up, Yahweh and the accuser make a bet. The accuser bets that if Job's station in life suddenly changes, then Job will reject God. Yahweh bets that even if something changes, Job will still love God. Now, poor Job, of course, knows absolutely none of this. He has no knowledge that his earthly life has been made a wager between two divine beings. But his life is about to change suddenly and significantly. Job is beset by boils and sores that cover his entire body, from the tips of his toes to the top of his head. Amid the agony of these weeping and pulsating wounds, Job does not stop praising God. He doesn't take a break. He doesn't blame God for what's happening to him. For the first time in the story of Job, in the book of Job, his wife shows up. Before this moment, she's never even mentioned in the entire text, but she shows up here to taunt Job, to ask him, why are you not blaming God? Why are you not turning away from this person who is causing you so much harm? So we encounter Job in the text Sophia read for us this morning. Job is now covered in his wounds. He's scratching himself with a piece of broken pottery. And he's sitting on the ash heap, a place where ashes are dumped after rituals and burials. He's sitting there as though he is someone in mourning. And he has every right to be. His life has been totally, suddenly, and completely transformed. Physically, he looks and feels nothing like his old self. 3 of his friends, they hear about all that has happened, and they come. They drop what they're doing. They leave all the towns that they call home, and they show up for their friend. They had no idea what Job needed. They just knew that they needed to be wherever he was. So they do. They show up, they see their friend crying on the ash heap, they tear off their clothes, they throw dust in the air because that kind of visible expression was expected for those who were seeking to demonstrate their solidarity with those who were suffering. They sat together in silence for 7 days and 7 nights. Think about that for just a moment. How many of you have had moments of serious, serious discomfort, serious harm, serious despair? You've needed someone to show up. Can you imagine anyone in your life showing up to sit with you in total silence for a week? That is a huge and mighty task, and yet Job's friends do exactly that. How many of us can imagine ourselves showing up for someone like that? You don't have to raise your hands, but we can be honest with ourselves. Can we see ourselves going to a friend in need and sitting in silence for 7 days and 7 nights? Can we see ourselves tearing off our clothes, throwing dust in the air to be with them in their despair and in their suffering? This, I think, is the ministry of showing up, the ministry of presence. Our New Testament text this morning, which Sophia also read, is part of Paul's last letter. They are not his final words, to be clear, but they are the last written and then added into the Bible. Taken as a whole, I believe that this second letter to Timothy is a deeply moving one between a teacher and a student. And it marks a transition between a new and into a different kind of relationship. If it wasn't clear, Paul is dying in this text. He knows this is the end. And after a few paragraphs where he expresses his joy in ministry and his hopes for Timothy, we encounter this simple statement: do your best to come to me soon. And the translation that Sophia read, the text read, come to me quickly. Come to me quickly. Amid the reality of the human condition, faced with confronting the promise of death, what Paul needs, after living this wonderful, amazing, far-traveled, well-traveled life, at the end of that life, what Paul needs is for his friend to simply come, to simply show up as quickly, as soon as he can. Two things stand out to me in these stories. Both Job and Paul are facing pain and suffering, yet neither of them blames God for their circumstances. Indeed, both of them seem to continue celebrating and praising God. And the people who they need are invited to simply show up. In the case of Job's 3 friends, they show up and share in his suffering, and then they just stay. In the case of Paul, Timothy receives a letter telling him to simply come. And that's important because Paul, we know, uses letters to give people invitations or instructions as to how they should be living their lives. So this is not a simple, hey, friend, I miss you. This is a directive. You need to be here because I need you right now. I think we can assume that Timothy took that seriously and showed up. I think that both of these stories highlight an enduring truth, which is that we often don't fully know what we need, but we will always need other people. In creating humankind, God invites us to do, live, celebrate, and share in life together in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, for better and for worse. Yes, those are marriage vows, but there are also simple ways to think about how we share and live this life together. I think that we are often really okay with good times, with good health, and the parts that are for better. But we are not so good at the bad times, not so good with the sickness, not so good with the things that are for worse. And when we consider why, a lot of our thoughts boil down to feelings of inadequacy in the face of adversity, a lack of preparation, embarrassment about not really knowing what someone might need, and our own general discomfort with pain. We're afraid of looking foolish, forgetting that God has told us before that God will use what is foolish to simply shame the wise, that it's okay for us to show up and not really know what we're doing. I think the good news of this day is that we are not actually asked by God to be prepared. We are not asked to be confident. We are not asked to be comfortable. We are not even asked to meet some standard of adequate. All we are asked to do when it comes to acknowledging the suffering of others is to simply show up. Can we accept our baptismal ordination into the ever-unfolding, unceasingly revelatory co-ministry that is love? Love first. Love always. Simply showing up for those who are in need, simply showing up for those who are in pain, who are hurting, who need something to be different in this world. Yes, in this world where we are often asking ourselves what is needed, how and when it might be necessary, wondering how we can help, it is easy to become overwhelmed by all the considerations, but God reminds us in both of these stories the best place to start is to simply show up, to practice the ministry of presence. I have told you before, and it is part of our Reformed tradition, that we are all called to be ministers. Because I've often asked, Reverend Thomas, what do you mean I'm a minister? I didn't go to school for that. You don't need to go to school to be part of the ministry of presence or the ministry of love. I believe those are the first two ministries that God invites all of us into. Can we love first? Can we love always? And can we show up? Can we see people who are in need, people who are hurting? And can we join them, share in their suffering, share in their lament, and can we find some way together to heal, to be made more whole, to hold on to more hope, to feel and really believe in more love, love overwhelming, love ever-extending, love that is abundant? I hope and I pray that the answer for each of you is yes. I think we saw a bit of this in our story for all ages, where we weren't quite sure what things were going to go into all of these compassion kits, but all around the room, we all had something to offer. You didn't even know you were going to have that thing to offer this day. And yet, when it was called out, you knew exactly what was needed for exactly that time, because first, you showed up here on site or online, and second, you were simply attentive to the needs of the people who happened to be in the room. You heard someone was coughing, and you said, I've got cough drops. Someone fell, I've got an ice pack. Someone needs a pick-me-up, I've got candy or tea. Someone has a boo-boo or a scratch, I've got Band-Aids. And all of that stuff can be a way that we simply show up. All of that was meant to invite each of you in the pews who may not go back to Kids Space on this day or ever, to invite you into a reality that sometimes we don't even know what we have that someone else is going to need. And that's why, again, God doesn't ask us to be confident or prepared or comfortable. God simply says, can you show up? Can you be a part of the ministry of presence? Can you be a part of the ministry of love? It's important to know that is a co-ministry. That is not God's job alone, not Jesus' job alone, certainly not my job alone, and not your job alone either. It's a ministry that all of us do together, bringing the talents and gifts and indeed treasure that we've got to be a part of that joint ministry, that co-ministry of presence and love, with the hope being that we might just build a more just world for all. I have two prayers for you this day. The first is that you will sit seriously with the question, what do you need? That you will seriously write something down and hold on to that, not just for today, but for the days ahead. And the second prayer is simply that you will be open to accepting your ordination into the ministry of presence and the ministry of love, that you will accept God's call for you to be a part of sharing in someone else's journey, to make their world and your world more healed, more whole, and better for us all.